recording, so we have all of this. Welcome everyone who is here. We are on day 4 of our facilitation week. Hi, Isabel. And I'm so glad that Joan is here. Joan is an amazing woman. I have been tracking Joan's work since the start of the pandemic, and I haven't told this to you, Joan, but I consider myself a fangirl of your work. And I just knew, I was like, you know what, if there's one person I have to invite for this whole week, it's going to be you, and you were the first person in my mind. So this is very exciting for me to have you here. And let me do the formal introductions. So Joan is the founder and CEO of Organomics, an organization strategy and leadership development consultancy that she established in 2008 to help leaders and organizations develop, perform, and transform. I love that bit. She is a Fulbright scholar with a master's degree in adult education and a master's degree in developmental psychology. Joan works with boards, executives, and leadership teams to help them to develop systemic intelligence and to design and lead complex adaptive change in their organizations with turnaround results. And they work together, they emerge new cultures, operating models, and organizational forms through the work that she does with them. Joan applies the Organomics methodology that she created, which is most often referred to as groundbreaking. And I think that's part of why I'm such a fangirl. It's a novel theory and practice for organizations which integrates strategy, systems thinking, complexity, and adult development theory. It provides an ecological map for leaders to navigate the unique challenges they face and be fit for the current complex landscape we are in. It enables leaders to fundamentally shift how they take up their roles, reframe their assumptions, mental maps, and ways of knowing, and repattern their organizational systems for new ways of relating and operating to function as coherent wholes. In a nutshell, Joan's work enables leaders, teams, and organizations to liberate themselves from the constraints and patterns which no longer serve them, but in which they are stuck. And I think that is huge work, and we are going to get started with looking at the tip of the iceberg. And with that, I hand it over to you, Joan. Take it away.
Thank you, Kathy. Gosh, I should have sent you a shorter bio if I knew you were going to read it. But thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Because it's just 6 of us, I think that I just want to make it a lot less formal, and we won't have breakout groups, obviously, and that sort of thing. Why don't we just kind of, I'll introduce some of the core concepts, but maybe we just have it more as a dialogue between us. I think will work better than a formal workshop or presentation. I'll share some of the thinking and some of the slides just to sort of kickstart our dialogue, but is that okay? We have much more a kind of exploration together.
Absolutely.
Great. So I guess before we start, I'd love to know just a little bit about who is here. So I know I have some of your context, just a little bit about the role that you're in or that you're playing, and maybe what you're curious about. So just what you're bringing in today, just so I have a sense of who's here. You obviously all know each other. Is that right? You seem to me. Yeah.
We've gotten to know each other over the past 3 days more.
Yeah, so I'm coming in day 4. You all seem to be already connected. So if you wouldn't mind just giving me a little bit of, a kind of peek into your worlds, a little bit about who I'm talking to, it will make it easier for me to just know, what you bring into this conversation and how we want to have this conversation. So over to you. Anybody?
Can I go? Can I start?
Please, Krista.
Yeah. So my name is Krista. I'm based in an island called Penang in Malaysia. And what I do is I run a business with my husband, and what we do is we help business owners get visible online. So we've been running the business for a while, but over the years, as we develop websites and help our clients with marketing, we have been called more and more to do a lot of training. So that's where a lot of presentations, trainings, and even consultations happen, because I think that's part of the organic growth of the business. So how I got into MAFA was that I know Daniel, the president, for a while now, and he was always talking about facilitation. And then he says, you've been doing facilitation, you just don't know it. And I said, I'm not too sure. So I said, oh, let me give it a shot. Let me just join. And since this was Facilitation Week with a number of very interesting speakers, so I said, let me just explore and see where that goes, and see where the training, presenting, and perhaps facilitation, will open up different worlds and different people to me, like in this Zoom call. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, thank you so much, Krista. That's so helpful. Thank you. What about others?
Can I go next?
Barry.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Barry. I'm also from Penang, but I'm actually on holiday at the moment in South Thailand. So I'm sorry, but I may not be able to stick with the whole session. Hopefully I'll be able to stick until for the next maybe 45 minutes. But anyway, my background is actually I'm an engineer by training, but most of my career has been in management. In a senior leadership role, including managing director and CEO of a company. But I left that and recently started mentoring and coaching, basically trying to pass on my experience, perhaps to the younger generation trying to come up. Got very interested in coaching, got certified, and then also through Captain Chan, also took up facilitating. So now I'm doing a little bit of coaching and also taken a strong interest in leadership training as well. So that's where I am. And I saw the title of this session and I was very keen to join you, Joan, and see what you have to say. All this training and coaching and all that is quite new to me, but hopefully I'm basically contributing something back from my experience as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Barry. Good to connect. And yeah, it's anybody add in sort of what made you curious about joining this session? Because I understand you've been in many for the last few days. So what maybe drew you to this? What's interesting, or what are you curious about? Thanks, Barry.
Mm-hmm. So you're asking me or the rest?
No, whoever wants to go next. Oh,
Okay.
In terms of what you're curious about. Oh, if you want to, but yeah, if you feel.
Well, I'm just trying to get different dimensions in the leadership aspect of it, space, because like I said, I've been in a leadership role for many years, but basically learned through hands-on experience and mistakes that I've made along the way. So leadership theory and leadership ideas and all that, I'm only now beginning to find out. So a bit late in my career, so to speak, or my past life. But I'm quite excited about the new ways that people are, new ideas that are being brought into the leadership space, and getting much success in this area. And psychology and etc. has never been an explicit way of being used in my generation, so to speak, in leadership. And I find it's fascinating. So that's why I'm quite keen to hear as much as I can from your session, Joan. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Nice that you're stepping into this learning. It's never too late to learn. I think I'm learning every day as well, new things. So doing courses still, etc. Have to keep growing. What about others? Isabel.
Next. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Isabel, and I am a deputy head of school, come teacher at a preschool setting. So yeah, and I also do a lot of, during the school holidays, I do a lot of training for teachers in my school and also of other schools. So for me, the topic itself, the title of today's dialogue is very, I want to know more. Yes, that's right.
Wonderful. Thanks,
Okay.
Isabel. Brilliant.
Hi, may I?
Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Mala. Good evening, everyone. I'm actually an English teacher by training. And I took a bit of a detour because I thought it wasn't, I didn't have the patience to last in the teaching capacity. It was too much administration, too much government policy. So I decided to go into integrated communications. That little detour that I planned to take took about 25 years. So I still teach along the way. I still do soft skills training when I was in corporate com. So the bulk of my career has been in corporate communications, and I teach soft skills on the side, mostly branding related, communications related, issues and crisis management related, which is part of corporate communications work. The reason why I'm particularly interested in today's topic is over the last many, many years in corporate, it's always a challenge to get buy-in and alignment. So as I grew rank and file in the organization, they expect me to counsel, to advise and all of that, but it's not enough. We need to actually listen to people on the ground. They tend to know a hell of a lot better than we do. The further away we are from the ground, the less we know. So it's important to have engagement. And I thought walking, coming down to the ground and talking to people was enough, but it wasn't. As the organizations I worked in were getting bigger and bigger, in various countries. So I was working in multinationals. I can't be traveling to every single country and be on the ground all the time. So that's when Daniel, our mutual friend Daniel, who's the current president, asked me to look into the area of facilitation and later coaching, but facilitation first. So I'm very excited to, because you deal in this area of getting alignment in organizations. I'm very keen to hear what you have to share. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wow, that's a nice eclectic route career. Fantastic. Thank you. Who's next?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Kian An. How do I start? Okay, I'm actually in real estate, but I work in various roles. I'm in an NGO, an association where I basically I head the Malaysia Institute of Estate Agent. Is an NGO, and that's one thing I do. Second is I'm also in the one of the statutory body, which is the Board of Value Estate Agent. I'm one of the member in the statutory body. So that's more on the governmental side. And on the third thing is I have a real estate. I run the real estate team. And in that perspective, I have a team of a salesperson in real estate. I manage them, I coach them, I guide them in terms of sales and marketing, all this stuff. That is part of what I do. But what I want to know more about facilitation is that because I am involved in NGO, I run the association with different group of people from different group of people, right? And I'm in the governmental department as well, and there are different kind of people. And I'm in the private sector. I run sales, manage salespeople, manage people from a different group of ages. So to me, is that I deal with a lot of people from different group, different backgrounds. So to me, facilitation is something that the reason why I take up coaching and training is all this is because I want to how do I say it? manage people. I want to understand them, and we want to build a team and legacies of for the betterment in the future. So facilitation to me is something new that when you manage people, you not only need to coach or guide them, you need to facilitate. So like most of y'all here, I'm trying to understand what is the difference facilitation compared to coaching, training, all these things. So to me is how can I use this skill to apply to the different role that I'm playing in the association, in the government level, in the corporate level, as a personal level, things like that. So that's what I'm looking forward in terms of facilitation. Yep.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm so glad I asked this question. There's so much diversity of experience and roles and contexts that you are all in. So really good for me to try and make sense of that and see how we can make it practical. Thank you so much, Kian.
I'll go next and make it quick. So
Thanks.
I'm Kathy. I've been helping to organize, I've been organizing this whole facilitation week. I work as a facilitator coach. I run my own business, working with organizations and teams and individuals as well. Really looking at helping them grow, and that could look very different for different contexts. And I think I'm especially interested in the work that you do, Joan, because I think I got introduced to systems thinking and Peter Senge's work a couple of years back, and I think it's always been a question of how do you bring this to life with organizations, especially when things are so complex. And so for me, inviting you and attending this session is really about how do I come into a space and not just look at things as microcosms and just linears, but look at it through the big picture lens. So that's where I am interested in this session.
Wonderful, thanks, Kathy. And we'll talk a bit about Peter Senge's work, different kinds of systems thinking that can be applied. That's good for me to know. Who have we not heard from?
I think I have not spoken. I actually have not spoken.
Oh, hello, yes.
Sorry, I'm driving right now and my phone holder just collapsed on me. So I just pulled over for a while. I am Bawani. I am a coach, I am a speaker, and I work a lot around the area of gratitude. But more than that, I do work all the way from individuals to corporates, NGOs, associations, government. So when I saw the word organizational ecology, kind of struck a chord with me, and I thought, let's just explore, because people are just so unique and diverse, and making sense of all of them from where they come from sometimes can be a lot. So I'm just here to see what is it that I can learn and pass it back on to the communities I work with. That's all from me.
Thanks, Bhavani. Wonderful. Be careful on the road. And is it, how do you pronounce it? Zafrina? Are you there or not? Maybe not. Okay. So let's get started. Thank you so much for sharing all that, everyone. I think where I would like...
Hi, I'm Zafrina.
Hi, Zafrina.
Yeah, sorry, I was driving.
That's okay.
Oh,
Welcome.
sorry, okay. Let me introduce a very short brief about myself and my background. I'm Zafrina. I'm a previous trainer of government under Majlis Amanah Rakyat and currently involved under my own consultation. So currently I'm doing a business and financial mentor and coaching and financial consultation for the business person, especially businesswoman in Penang currently. So that is what basically my profile, a short.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Zafrina. Let me ask all of you, how many of you have heard of systems thinking? Because one of the key kind of things we're going to talk about we start to look at organizations as ecologies, is to bring a systems lens. So just sort of like on a scale of sort of 0 to 10, who knows 0? Like you're blank slate, you haven't heard of it, know nothing. Maybe just drop it in the chat. If you know a little bit and, you know, you've played with a bit, you know, like Kathy, you were saying, are you a 2 or a 3? Or are you 10, like you're deep expert in this, and you know a lot. Okay, so 0 is Kathy, a 4, zeros. Okay, lots of zeros. Looks like code, bit of code, binary code. Yeah. Oh, 3. Okay, who's BP? Is that Barry? Oh, Barry's 0. BP is
Me, Bawani.
Ah, Bhavani, sorry. Okay, cool. And Mala 3. Okay, 2. Okay. All right, that gives me a good sense. So I'm going to kind of assume very little, and those like Kathy and Bhavani and Mala, if you know a little bit, just jump in. So I might start with, you know, why organizational ecology? And I think one of the, I might just share some of, just to get us going. See some of these slides. Let me go back to the beginning. So I think one of the most important things that we all are facing, and I think many organizations today, are how do we help organizations sorry, to function in complexity and to function with multiple disruptive change. And so the question that I've always sort of been curious about is, how do we move beyond the current organizational paradigms ourselves to really help systems change? And I think one of the things that I'm very aware of is that organizations and our field, you know, those of us who are in training and in facilitation and in change work, which is really more my kind of space, there are a couple of sort of dominant lenses or assumptions or ways of thinking about how to make organizations more effective, how to help organizations change, how to help them address problems and, you know, perform and transform. And these are these three lenses are ones that I think we need to think about when we start to think about organizations. And typically the two dominant ones, the two lenses that are mostly applied to organizations, are technical and psychological. So what do I mean by that? Technical, if we look at organizations through a technical lens, we tend to assume that, you know, we can make them better and we need to improve them or fix our problems using things like processes, structures, reward and recognition systems, things like that, stuff that is sort of outside of the human domain, so to speak, and more, you know, things that we can fix technically with stuff. And then we've got, if we move beyond that, the other kind of assumption is, oh, well, we can make things better and improve things by improving and thinking about how people are. So technical training might be one, how people communicate, capability, people's personalities, their styles, their values. So, you know, if I kind of say to you, when I go and see most of my clients who want to get better at things in their organization, I kind of hear two descriptions. One is, and you know, if I say, what's the problem that you think you have that you want to address, or what's the goal, I will hear two kinds of descriptions. One description is something about the organization. its structures, its processes, how it runs, etc. And then the other description is about people. So there's a problem with people, Joan. They don't communicate well. They don't trust each other. They have the wrong values. They're not accountable. You can hear in that, I'm sure, like, I'll just check with some of you, like, do you hear those as some of the descriptions if you're working with organizations, or even when you think about how you go about trying to make things better? Do those two things, can you relate to what I'm saying? Do you hear those as kind of ways to fix or improve? What else do you hear? Do you hear those things and other things, or mainly how do you think we think about organizations? Anybody?
Yeah, from my experience, that's very much it. I think it's mostly talking about systems and organizations set up, and then how this internal structure and networking communication problems that come up. So
Right.
those are the issues that always crop up in my experience.
Yeah. And others similar? Oh, we need to fix the org structure, Joan. We need to re-engineer a process. We need to put in a new process. We need to change our performance reward system. We need new technology. We need a CRM system, stuff like that, right? We hear that all the time, and that's valid. And do you also hear stuff around the people, like people need to improve their capability? We don't have the right skills. This manager's style or this person's personality. Do you hear that as well? Okay.
Yeah.
So I would say for me, 99.9% of the time, if I ask leaders in organizations, what's the problem or what's the goal or how do you think you want to go about addressing this, I will hear things in either of those two buckets. Okay. 99.9% of the time. However, what I'm going to introduce to you today is actually there's a third lens through which we can make sense of organizations, through which we can think about how to improve them. And this third lens is the systemic one. So if we go back to my slide, you can see that mostly I'm saying stuff that we hear is either in the technical solutions or problem statements or in the psychological or the interpersonal, the human. And I'm saying actually there's this third systemic lens. And today what I'm going to share with you is, what if we bring this systems lens to organizations? And what if we bring this way of thinking as practitioners into organizations? What would change? What would we be looking for? What would we be working with? And what's very important about this is this isn't instead of. This isn't an alternative to technical and psychological or interpersonal. This is like an additional lens. Okay, it's a lens that allows us to see more spaciously, to hold a bigger perspective, and to intervene in organizations and see things and do things in ways that the psychological and the technical don't allow us to, because they sort of constrain how we make sense of our world if we only see it through those two lenses. And if we actually integrate this third lens, then we may actually see different data. We'll make sense of things a bit differently, and we may then intervene or put in solutions that look a bit different as well. So today I'm going to kind of invite you into putting on this pair of glasses, trying on a different way of seeing, a different way of making sense of organizations as an additional lens. By no means is this saying that there isn't still a place for the technical and the psychological. I think that's very important. I am a psychologist, so I don't sort of, I don't say that psychology must be now kind of swept out the room and that technical solutions have no place. Very important that this is integrative. And that's important for systems thinking as well, because actually systems thinking will say we want a more wide angle lens. We want to think of things through multiple perspectives. And we want to think of things in relational terms. So what's nice about this idea is that we can think about the technical, the psychological, and the systemic, and how they connect and relate to each other when we're looking at a particular problem in an organization or with a particular challenge we might have in a part of the system that we're working with, or to help people be more effective. So I want to begin with this question around what is an organization? What do you're all in organizations, you're all taking up roles in organizations. Let's have a quick conversation about how we would define an organization. Any thoughts on that? And feel free to put in the chat as well. If you think about, if I ask you, what's the definition of an organization? What is it? No right or wrong answers here, because there are multiple definitions about how we can think about organizations. Any ideas? Maybe I'll kickstart it and say, if you look in the sort of definition in English in the dictionary, it will say organization is a collection, many of the dictionaries say an organization is a collection of people coming together to work with a common goal. So largely it talks about an organization being a collection of people. What do you think? Do you agree with that definition? Does that make sense to you? Would you describe it some other way?
Bawani here. So I think my answer was pretty much the same, just that I had one extra sentence which says a group of people from different levels, because you have exec, senior management, head of departments, CEO. So that was my only different thing from what you said.
Right. So it's not simply a collection of people. I think, Bhavani, what you're introducing is that might be just like too simple a definition, because actually it's what is in your description is that they're actually different groups of people with different place in the hierarchy. So there's kind of a relational system as well.
Yes, correct. As well as probably you, maybe I'm overthinking this, the different experience and skill sets that they bring.
Right. Yep. And they would come to the organization with those and be expected to take up a role to take those up, right? So if done right, talent will then get to grow as individual and lead. Okay. So I want to share with you, and please drop in what you feel are other definitions, but I want to share with you this idea that you can think about an organization as an organized group of people with a particular purpose, or an entity comprising one or more people having a particular purpose. These are all definitions from the dictionary. These are others: a set of meaning-making processes, a jazz improvisation, a flexible mental model. That's Carl Weick. Organizing activity instead of an entity. It's a complex adaptive system is a new emerging definition of what an organization is. And why I'm introducing this idea is because if we start to think systemically, then we don't only see organizations as collections of people, or as a set of processes and structures, but we see organizations as a system. And we can define an organization as a network of roles, relations, and rules of engagement with a boundary around it, like an ecosystem interacting with other entities and the environment. So it's almost like we start to think about organizations as an ecosystem, as a complex network of relations, because actually what we know, an ecosystem definition or an ecology, if we think about it out in the world, is a network of different organisms that come together to form a whole, and each part of the system is absolutely integral to the outcome that that system gets. And so an organization is actually like an ecology. We've never thought about an organization like this traditionally, because as I explained, traditionally we see organizations as socio-technical, as a collection of people with some technical and with, interacting with technology. But an organization is actually also a relational network comprised of many subsystems or parts in continuous patterns of interaction, which they co-create. Okay, now this is a very different definition. So I'm going to stop there and say, does that make sense, what I'm saying? If we start to think about our organizations, just like we think about a forest or an ocean or a desert, where actually these are ecological kind of environments where each part of the environment is integrally linked. And if you actually impact one part of that system, you actually impact the whole. Who resonates with that idea, or does that make sense to people? So
Yes, I think it makes a lot of sense, Joan, because without all this interconnectivity and networking, it will be disorganized. If some things are run outside of the system, it will be disorganized, and the organization wouldn't necessarily survive.
Right. And typically what I think happens at the moment is we try and in organizations address the individual, address the one part of the system. We try and optimize a part rather than we actually look at the whole, and we look at how each part connects into the behavior or the outcome that is emerging in the system. And the idea behind this systems glasses is that actually, instead of breaking things down and trying to analyze where the problem lies and try and fix just a part, we're actually doing something which is very different. We're actually saying, how does the whole work so we can make sense of the part? So we are looking for the pattern of relations between the different parts. So kind of what Bhavani was saying is, it's not just simply a collection of people, but they're managers, there are employees, there are different clusters or subsystems that get into relational patterning. And the relationships are not just personal between people, but they're between subsystems or entities. And so we can think about organizations as a complex set of relations between the parts, and that all behavior in the organization actually comes from the interaction and the relationship between the parts rather than from the part alone. And what is happening in the organization, the outcome, the property of the organization actually doesn't sit in the part alone. It's always in relationship to another part. So it's a completely different way about thinking about organizations. And so I want to give you a very practical framework for how you can think about systems thinking in organizations. One of the things about systems thinking is it's been around, say, since the 20s or 1920s, 1930s. And it's across multiple fields: physics, biology, ecology, family systems theory, etc. But it's actually coming to organizations now more so, and it's coming to organizations quite late. We like one of the last fields, those of us working in organizations, that is really starting to integrate systems thinking. And we could have a really powerful conversation about why, but I sort of think about it as, you know, when it's kind of shifting from this idea that the earth was the center of the universe. At one time, you know, it was thought that the sun was the center of the universe and everything revolved around improving behavior through the individual. And now we're kind of saying, actually, the earth's at the center. We need to think about improving the systemic relations, and then the behavior of the individual will start to improve. Okay. So let me give you a practical framework for how this applies, because I think one of the reasons it hasn't taken hold in organizations is because there hasn't really been a practical way to apply it. So Kathy spoke about systems, Peter Sengi's work, and his work is came out in the 1990s, but if you look around, it hasn't taken hold in organizations. It hasn't really taken hold in business schools, although at one time it was kind of a prescribed reading. And I think one of my theories about that is, whilst we know systems thinking is essential for complexity, it is it's hard to work with if you don't have a framework which actually in some ways is accessible and simple. So I want to give you a framework tonight, which is taking systems thinking and applying it quite practically in an organizational context. So my purpose and my work is to try and bring systems thinking to organizations, to help organizations be more effective applying this lens. So I'm just going to switch those. At the moment, organizational psychologists look at focusing on the behavior of employees, of individuals, and they apply psychological principles looking at style, personality, unconscious experience, etc. What I'm going to introduce to you is that actually, if we start applying a systems lens, we can introduce this new role of organizational ecologist. That's someone who applies systems thinking and complexity thinking and principles to organizations for whole system health. And it's slightly different principles to an organizational psychologist. Ecology is the study of relationships between living organisms, including humans, and it looks at the organisms at the individual, the population, community, ecosystem, and biosphere level. So when we look at organizations as systems, we start to look at them at the individual level, at the role level, at subsystem level, and at the relational level. So here's the framework. I call it the individual role system framework. It's got three components. The first component is the system. So what do we mean by a system? A system is any set of relations with a boundary. So a system could be a marriage, two partners in a marriage. It could be a manager and an employee. It could be a parent and a child. It could be a family system. So it could be a system of 3 or 4. It could be a team of 7 or 8. It could be a department like HR or marketing or communications, or it could be a bigger division. It could be a whole organization. What's important is a system is a set of relations with a boundary, and that it gets all systems get into patterns of organization between the parts. And everybody in a system takes up a role to co-create those patterns. So if we think about it if we think about a lift, A lift is a very temporary system. We get in and out of it quite quickly, and we kind of engage and relate to lift riders, everybody in the lift, in very cursory ways. But if you get into a lift and there's no one standing in that space, you're free to stand wherever you like. If you get into a lift and there's one other person standing there, then they will define where you can stand. And usually there's some kind of rule of engagement for how you take up your role in relation to that other person in the lift. How far apart you can stand. Do you talk to them? Do you not talk to them? Etc. And if these are kind of implicit agreements or contracts that we come to around where you can stand, and if you break those rules of engagement for how you take up your role as lift rider, then you will get some feedback from the other person. They might adjust, they might move, they might, if they feel very threatened, if you stand really too close and they think you are a bit nutty, they might try and stop the lift or get out the lift early. If you get in a lift and there are two people and you're the third person, you will stand where you can in relation to them. So you can't stand wherever you like. And they will probably adjust a little bit as you come in. And this is the thing about a system. We are always never acting alone. We are always acting in relation to another part of the system or another person taking up a role. And we are always in a system. There is constant calibration and movement. A system is never actually static. So when we talk about a system and bringing about change, we actually need to know that systems are continuously changing to stay alive. So if you get into the lift and there's 3 people and you're the 4th person, you'll see a different pattern emerge. Maybe each person will gravitate to the corners, and so that there's enough space between each person, and that becomes this kind of implicit negotiated contract. If you get in the lift and it's full, you don't stand. Mostly this never happens. Like, you don't get in the lift, squeeze in, look forward, start chatting to people. You'll probably put your back to people, maybe look down at the floor, or now we look at our phones to break the intimacy. But those are all implicit rules of engagement that come to be. And it's very important, if we start thinking about organizations, to think that every part in an organizational system actually is only defined by the other part. So where they occupy the role that they take up versus where you will begin to occupy it, and what's the pattern of relations between those parts. Is there a shared understanding of that? So the second part of this framework is the individual, and the individual the system is made up of multiple individuals or individual parts. And what's important here is this idea that every individual in a system carries a mental map of the system, how it should work, and their role in it. Now, most people think that what defines our behavior is who we are, our personality, our character, our style. And if we want to bring about change or improve things, we have to work at that, like who we are, what makes us up. But in fact, what this is introducing is this idea that you can actually, a lot of what drives people's behavior in organizations is this mental map that they carry. It's like their internal GPS system of what they think their role is, how their role connects and relates to other roles, and what the rules of engagement are, where they fit, what the boundaries are. And I can guarantee you, after doing this work for 30 years, if you ask people to draw their map of the system, literally to draw it, they will be able to draw how they see their system, where they see themselves, and they will place themselves in relation to other parts. They will be able to talk about the role, and they'll be able to talk about the rules of engagement and what's going on in the system. And mostly the beautiful thing about this is what is important, I think, for you as facilitators is that, and as people working in organizations, for all of us, is that generally people don't know that they carry that map. it's like invisible to them, it's submerged to them, it's implicit, they're subject to it. Secondly, we walk around with this map as if it were true. And there's this brilliant person, a founder of semantics, as Korzybski, and he said, the map's not the territory. What we think is the organization, what we think is the territory, may not be. We make up a map. We construct a map in our minds of what it is. But here's the very important thing. If we construct a map that is different to another part of the system about what our role is relative to theirs, then we may be in incoherence. And often where there's conflict or noise, what I call noise in an organization, is because these maps don't fit together coherently. People might be running very different assumptions. And mostly we try and fix things through improving interpersonal relationships between people or parts of the organization, through building trust, etc. Actually, one of the most powerful things we can do is start to build coherence between how the different parts of the system see their roles, and to build coherence around that. And in fact, what I mostly discover is in organizations, often the fight or the conflict or the duplication and the underperformance is not as much to do with who people are as people, but how they interact through role to role. Because this is an important idea, that actually every individual connects to the organizational system through the role. No one is in a system outside of role. That's what gives you license to come into the organizational system. The system, the organization defines the role, and you take it up. And so what's very liberating about this as a framework is that we can always think about ourselves in role, in system, not just about who we are, what makes us up, our styles, our personalities, etc. That's one lens. It's a psychological or interpersonal lens. What we can think about ourselves is as part of a system, taking up a role in relation to other roles, and that actually we carry these maps. So when we start to wear these glasses and look at ourselves in role, in system, and try and make sense of how others are making sense of that, their role in system, and where the interconnection is or where the interconnection isn't, then we can actually start to intervene in organizations in very different ways, because we can see different data. We make sense of things in a different way. And we aren't caught in this meaning-making system of, oh, the problem is technical with the structure, or the problem is with the person. Actually, the challenge we might have, or the improvement we can make, is in building coherence in the different interactions and role relations and rules of engagement in the system. So it's a whole new language. It's a whole new way of making sense of what's going on and where we might intervene. And the whole beauty about role, if you think about it, if you try and change a person, it's very hard to do, okay? Very hard. If any of you have done personality tests or things like that, you'll notice they don't change much over time. We're probably quite attached to kind of our identity and sense of self. And if you try and change somebody, make them change their character or their style or their personality, that you could say is that ethical, with diversity and bringing in, everyone kind of being their kind of what makes them special, right? Much more ethical to work with the idea of role, rather than try and change the person. And we think about it, role, and I don't just mean job role, by the way, I mean also like organizational role. How do people see the role of leader, How do people see the role of employee, the role of peer, the role of, governor or manager? So it's your job role, engineer, I'm the head of HR, but I'm also talking about organizational role, and I'm also talking about systemic role, like, is this person got the role of being the glue? There was a beautiful description earlier. Mala talked about her grandmother having been the glue. She played that role in the family system. And when her grandmother passed away, that role was not taken up by anybody else in the system. And so the family started to disconnect. And isn't that such a beautiful description of what I'm talking about? That every one of us at any time is taking up a role which is connected to other roles, which influences the outcome of the whole. I loved your description, because it's such a brilliant way of us making sense of, so actually when our grandmother dies, is another part of the system going to step into that role? How do we help another part of the system step into that role? So actually the family can stay together in the same way, or maybe now it's more appropriate that the system splits up. But we can start to think about the world, our organizations, in exactly this way. What roles are people playing that are systemic, like the glue, the challenger, the change agents, etc.? And what's really important is if you change role, you change behavior. If I'm in role of partner in my system of marriage, I behave in a particular way. If I go down the hall and wake up my children for school and I'm in role of parent, I change my behavior. Not because I change who I am necessarily, but because I step into a different role. And so we already have that agility in all of our DNA. We change roles multiple times through the day. And every time we change role, we change behavior, because what defines our behavior is as much as who we are, is our role that we are there to take up. You will never behave in the same way in role of mother as you would in role of partner in a marriage, as you would in role of consultant, as you would in role of leader or manager, because each of those roles defines a different kind of behavior, defines a different rule of engagement, and defines how you relate to others differently, depending on what role they are in relation to you. So what is beautiful about this is it's much easier to change role than to change person. And if you are able to step in, look at what role am I playing and how could I maybe change my role or help others to do that, you can bring about change in organizations and systems much more rapidly, with much more ease and much less resistance, because you're not trying to change fundamentally who people are, but you're helping them discover the role they're in, create coherence between roles, and see self in role in system. And, often if a part of the system is defining the role in one way and another part of the system defines it differently, I can guarantee you will get noise, you will get what I call conflict, underperformance, messy cultures, duplication of effort, burnout, exhaustion, because the system isn't in coherence role to role. So doing this work actually gives you a lot of commercial and interpersonal results if you are able to shift the role relations, the rules of engagement, change how the system works rather than change the technical, the structures and the processes, or try and change the person through their personality, values, styles, and behaviors. So I'll add one more idea and then let's talk about this, which is the idea that actually subsystems have roles as well. And so when you're looking at an organizational system, a leadership team, HR, marketing, sales, they also have roles, and they will contract role to role for how that role gets played. What is the role of leader in this organization? What is expected of an employee or someone who is reporting to a leader? What are the rules of engagement implicitly agreed or contracted for, just like the lift riders, that tell us how the organization is going to function from a leadership perspective. And if we bring it to your roles as coaches, as facilitators, how are you seeing your role? How are others you're relating to seeing your role? Is there role coherence? And how could you start to think about your role as a facilitator, not only as creating space and stuff for group work to happen, but if you've changed and stepped into an additional role like organizational ecologist, how could you help systems discover themselves, work in relational role-to-role patterning differently, etc.? So an organizational ecologist, distinct from a facilitator, and of course, these are equally valid roles, but they're different, would be looking at the organizational system or the system in the room and how different roles are being taken up and played and how that kind of creates the emergent outcome that you get. Okay, so let's talk about what I've just said. Let's hear your thinking about that. Questions, reactions?
Got a question in the chat, which is, can an individual play multiple roles in a system?
Yes, great question. We are all playing multiple roles all the time. And in fact, with complexity, more and more what I'm seeing in organizations, this is really important, is that we are often given, not only like multiple roles, we're given, like leader and peer and employee, etc., which we all have. So we're always in multiple roles, but we're also getting additional job roles. So what do I mean by that? Like this last few weeks, I've been working with a client where there's a lot of interpersonal noise and conflict in the organization. We start to uncover what's going on, and I'm facilitating a session and I'm asking questions about role. And what I discover is that this woman has been given both the job of a COO and the job of being the head of the Australia division of the company. And so people don't see her in both of those roles. Which role is she occupying when? And so it's very difficult for people to be working as a system coherently together because that is all confused. And sometimes when they think that she's in the role of the COO, then other people step into the role of the CEO of Australia, try and take up that role. And then it creates all kinds of dissonance because then they try and manage peers and they're going, why are you stepping into that role? It's not yours, right? And so just them discovering that actually there are these two roles. The dominant role she's been stepping into is COO, and she's been letting the other role sort of she hasn't been really stepping into that other role so much because the COO role feels like the more elevated one. Other people are then stepping into the role of the CEO of Australia, and that's creating all kinds of problems. So very quickly we discover that system of relations, we reset it, and the noise starts to die down because she starts to occupy both roles. And we put into the system rules of engagement for how to operate and to be clear around in which role is she in which meeting, in which context. Didn't change who she is, didn't change building trust in the relationship. But when I started the work, people started saying, what's the problem, Joan? It's the operating model of the company, it's the structure, we must change reporting lines, or, there's a problem with this individual and, how she leads. So you can see how starting to wear this pair of glasses actually changes things. Very important to see the multiple roles that are being played.
Question.
Other thoughts or questions?
Question.
Melo.
Joan, I'm thinking from a point of view of like from a manufacturing base, right? So if you can imagine a production line, we need things to work because we are chasing output. We have to deliver the goods of a certain quality at a certain time, and we have to also manage our costs, right? We can't afford mistakes because mistakes cost money, cost time. So for people who are working in this sort of setting, roles need to be clear. You can't tell me that today this person is COO, and then tomorrow she is, CEO of this unit or management, MD of the site. It's very confusing. So, I mean, so how do you reconcile that? Because we're talking about effectiveness of communications in our company, and we're talking about getting alignment. So isn't having multiple roles like that confusing to the people on the ground? I mean, I would be confused if someone came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm this, and tomorrow I'm that."
Yeah, but so Mala, I'm not advocating that people get to take up those roles. What I'm saying is that in organizations, more and more, that's what is happening. People have a complex set of roles in different contexts, and this is being designed without understanding systems thinking. And they just think, oh, well, this person. So I had a client who said they did a merger. They brought two companies together, each with their own CEO. But then they didn't want to disband the two companies because the brands of those companies were really valuable. So what they did was they kept the two companies, they kept the two CEOs, they created a third organization, but they gave the same person who was the CEO of the one company to be the CEO of the third entity, the merged company. And when they called me in because they were underperforming and not delivering and the share price was being impacted, they called me in to say, Joan, no one's accountable around here. You must do a values and behaviors workshops. The problem is with the employees and with managers not holding people to account. But actually the real problem is they had designed the system in a way which made it too complex and impossible for all those dual roles to be played. And that was running into the whole organization. So the way to fix it wasn't by making people more accountable. The way to address it is to reset the roles and reduce the complexity. So I think what you're saying is absolutely right. But because people don't have a systems lens, they miss this. And they think that for efficiency, we can have one person do two roles. It's cheaper, less cost. And actually the CEO of the big global company they were reporting to, he wouldn't have another two people on his executive team, he just would have one. So leaders are making faulty assumptions about how roles sit and how complexity works, right? So I think you're right. Unless you're really clear, you sow role confusion. And in fact, your symptom you get is interpersonal conflict and cultural issues and underperformance, but the problem is sitting in the role relational design. Does that make sense?
So who would be looking at this sort of things? Would it be HR mainly because of organizational development?
Absolutely. And that's why I'm saying most OD practitioners today work psychologically. They mostly come, if you, and I discovered this because if you go to universities and training academies that look at OD training and look at training of facilitators, all of these trainings are through the psychological lens, through the personal. They don't introduce systems thinking. They don't introduce complexity theory. They don't introduce role theory like this. And so people in OD are mostly trying to diagnose the person, test them, fix them, do 360-degree feedbacks on the individual, etc. But they miss the complex set of role relations that the individual is embedded in. So what I'm advocating is actually, if we keep just trying to do OD work through the psychological and the interpersonal and the individual, we're missing a vital part of our reality. And here's the thing, you can't address systemic issues using psychological interpersonal means. You're in the wrong territory. Does that make sense? And so this is about context. I think, Mala, what you're saying is absolutely yes. In production lines, which are running in a linear way, absolutely every part of that production line in that form of system will know exactly where they fit, where the boundary is, where the baton change is, etc., etc. Much clearer boundaries, much simpler. But if you step into organizational systems, it gets a lot more complex. Actually, when you're in groups, in rooms, it can be a lot more complex too.
My question, Joan, really is in the work that you do, right? So where the systems have been so tuned to looking at technical and psychological approaches, how do we get them to a place where they are ready and prepared to look at things systemically? Because the ask is always usually the first two. And I feel like the transition from the psychological and the technical is the hardest part. I think once they're bought and sold to the systemic lens, then the work gets somewhat easier, right? There's an understanding, there's a readiness. But that transition space is, I feel, the most difficult.
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest adaptive challenges we face for leaders, for organizations, is to start to reframe how they see the world and how they reframe how they make sense of their problems. And it's so implicit, it's so embedded, this dominant logic, that it's either a technical problem or a psychological one, that it's very hard for them to start to see in this way. But there are ways to gift the glasses, to invite leaders to try it on, right? And I guess there's two ways to do it. One is just kind of start to introduce them to systems thinking, how to think about things in more relational terms, how to look for, actually give them some of the theory or a framework that underpins. That's why I find this ergonomics role in system framework really helpful, because it gives them a very practical way in. Stories, I haven't told you many tonight, but actually telling stories about how this works, very helpful, right? Where you can give examples. Like I've given you two when I was addressing, my last question. And then a third way in is through the questions that you ask. So that questions, you would all know this, are very powerful interventions. And so when you ask different questions, you help people make sense in different ways, and you help them create new information. So instead of saying, if someone comes back and says, like, I'll tell you this story. So I have a colleague and friend and client who she's in role of culture change consultant, OD, to a high-performing, high-growth startup. She has a brilliant relationship with the CEO, and the work is going so well, he invites her inside the company to come and be the head of culture in the organization. And she kind of thinks about it, she's not sure, but she decides to take the job. 6 weeks into taking the job, she a whole lot of conflict starts to emerge with her and the CEO. And she calls me and she says, Joan, I don't know what I've done wrong. I don't know how I've upset him, but I had such a brilliant relationship with the CEO, and now he's being really weird with me. He's, he's kind of ignoring me in certain meetings, and my peers who are in the exec team, who I used to coach, who I had a brilliant relationship with, now they're also like weird with me. So what's going on? If you bring the systems lens, nothing has changed in any of those people in 6 weeks. But the behavior is emerging from the interrelationships. She has changed her role from being consultant on the boundary of the organization to being an employee inside the organization. Instead of her being the advisor to the CEO, the expert advisor from the outside, she is now his employee. He's her boss. It changes the way they relate. She's running an old map. She's still behaving as if she were a consultant, an advisor, a coach. Actually, now she's a peer, she's an employee. She has to change her behavior because the role map requires that. But she runs an old map, she hasn't reframed. He has changed. He's in the CEO. He's in the role of boss. He has to treat her like she's an employee because she's a member of the leadership team now. He can't treat her differently and have meetings on the side with her as if she was still his external consultant. The minute the role changes, the boundary conditions of where you fit in a system change. Your role relations have to change. If you run an old map and you think you're in one role when in fact you're in another, you're in trouble. The system, the property, the behavior, the noise will emerge from that incoherence. Okay. Make sense? Right. So where we want to help leaders is give them examples where there might be noise emergent or underperformance and start asking questions about how do you see the role? How do you think others see the role? What are the current ways that you, draw the boundary? Ask them to draw a map and ask other leaders to draw the map so that you can kind of start to create information for them through a role system relational lens. Do you think that other people see the role the same way you do? Do you think that they have this? What if you change the rule of engagement to make it like this? What do you think might change? So you can ask questions that introduce the lens without even saying you're getting them to be systems thinkers. Okay. The more practical you can make it through story, through practical questions, the more they'll actually embrace it. Okay. Wendy, and I know we've got 2 minutes to go, but you're on mute, Wendy.
Thank you very much. The systems thinking is fantastic in terms of that. My question is twofold. One is about how do you contain the conversation? As you said, it is complex. And when you talk about psychology, when you talk about technical, it's easy for someone to hold the boundaries of it. But when you talk about ecological and all that complexity, as a facilitator, how do you then bring it, you've got a day or something like that. How do you then agree on what's coming up? Because you can open a Pandora box quite easily. So that was one. And the second one was about the mental map. So as individuals, there are mental maps and you want to surface its unseen subconscious. And I was curious about the mental maps of roles as well. And how do we surface that?
Yeah. So there are techniques like asking people to draw their role biography, like, what roles have they taken up in other organizations? You can ask people to draw, and what's the history of how they've taken up roles. So starting to get them to think about that as a coach, you can ask them. You can ask people to draw their map of the system and where they would put their role in it. And then you can do a session with them around inviting them to explore the conversation, to discover their system, to discover their role, how their role connects with other roles. So that's another way to do it. And I think another way to do it is through something called a technique I use called role analysis, where people take a real problem or challenge that they have, and you ask them a whole lot of questions around how they see their role in relation to that challenge or in relation to that goal, something they want to achieve, and how they see other people's roles in relation to that, and how they describe what's going on in the role relations that connects to that challenge or problem. So the one is a role biography, another is like a role system mapping, and a third, and the other techniques, I'm just giving you these three, a third is to say, let's take a real problem or challenge you have, and let's explore the role relations in connection to that challenge. And you can do that in multiple ways, like just one-on-one with somebody, or you can, sometimes what I do is I invite other people in to be consultants to this person, to ask them questions and to uncover and help them uncover what's going on in the system in relation to the role. And I often ask them, with every question you have to share your hypothesis. So people get to hear other people's assumptions and maps about the role, and they'll discover that, oh, how I'm seeing it isn't the way they're seeing it. Okay. So you start to create new information that way. And it's not so much unconscious, it's much more assumptive, like what assumptions are you holding? What hypotheses are you holding? So those would be some of the techniques. But I think to your point, you don't want to open up Pandora's box in a group setting. So you want to be very careful about which techniques you use where and how you do it. Because sometimes inviting people to draw their maps and other people see how they represent it on other people's maps can be very tricky. So I would start it with individual first, safe, more in a coaching kind of way. And, you know, that's probably a safer place. As a facilitator, I'd introduce it more through story, through examples, rather than try and work with it on your own until you're more experienced, you know, in terms of the actual system in the room. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. I'm aware we're a couple minutes over, so maybe we'll take one more question, or otherwise we can just do some checkouts. Anybody have a burning question? Okay. I'd love just to hear one word from everyone, just to go around to hear how, you know, where this landed you, not a comment about the session, but more just what does this mean for your role? Like one word that describes the impact this has for you or your role, this thinking potentially. And I might just jump around and ask people so we go quickly. Otherwise, Kathy, I'll come to you last. Bhavani, maybe just one word.
Mind opening.
Mind opening. Thank you, Bhavani. Krista.
Clarity.
Thank you. Is it Ramazan? Not. I didn't meet you. I think may not be there. Rina. Or people we didn't meet. Or Isabel.
Insightful.
Sorry?
Insightful.
Insightful. Thank you, Isabel. Andy, are you there? Didn't meet Andy.
Yes, Joanne, I came a bit late, so I just heard the last part and all that. I think I just be careful about some assumptions that we make. Assumptions, I think, one word. Yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Andy. Wendy.
Dimensions.
Lovely. Thanks. Barry.
Resonance, I think, resonance. So resonates with me, yeah.
Thank you. And in. Didn't connect with you either earlier, if you're there. Okay, Mala, and then I'll go to Kathy.
Hyphenated, back to the drawing board.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Sorry we're a few minutes over. Kathy, I'll just hand back to you.
Thanks. I think the word for me, first of all, is I think relief. Just to know that there are ways. But I think it's been a very insightful sharing, Joan. And I know that with many sessions that I've joined of yours, there's always something that I take away, and there's always a working at reworking my mental map. And I think in this conversation, what you enabled us to do is really looking at how can we help others rewire their mental maps. And I think there's more. There's definitely more, and I'm sure there will be some who are looking to engage with you, and I will share your LinkedIn, your contact details with everyone over here too. But I just wanted to thank you so much, Joan, for your sharing. Thank you for everyone who did hop on at whatever time you did. I think the right people were here at the right time, and that's all for me.
Great, thanks. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a joy to work with you. And yes, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got articles and more ways and practices and things for, you know, building this lens and this practice. So I'm very happy to share. Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Joan.
Thank you.
Joan.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Kathy.
Bye. Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.